My name is Michael Gonzalez, and I think the United States should lift the 50-year-old embargo against Cuba. Castro assumed control of Cuba in 1959. He seized U.S. properties, oil refineries, and other economic resources and made them possessions of the Cuban government. The U.S. cut off diplomatic and economic relations with Cuba. In 1961, U.S. trained Cuban rebels failed to overthrow Castro in the Bay of Pigs invasion. The 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis followed with more restrictions to the embargo. Now Castro has stepped down, but his brother Raul continues in power. I have not yet been to Cuba myself, but my father has traveled there with business people and groups of missionaries. His stories and pictures, as well as my personal research, have led me to my position on the U.S. embargo of Cuba. I will tell you the pro-embargo arguments and then present counter-arguments why the embargo is not effective and should be lifted. Pro-embargo argument 1 says that the lifting of the embargo would pour money into businesses owned by the Cuban government and keep the communist government going. We all agree that Fidel Castro is an evil man who led an evil command, and that his brother Raul appears to be taking over where Fidel left off. Here is my counter argument 1. The original intent of the embargo was to force leadership change. However, Castro lasted 50 years in power. Castro's leaving had nothing to do with the embargo. He left because he's sick. Human rights are just as bad. Many people are still in prison. Pro-embargo argument 2 says that by squeezing the Cuban economy enough, the U.S. government can make the Cubans even poorer, and maybe they will finally overthrow Castro. My counter-argument 2 says that this has clearly not worked, and it is immoral that we are not helping these people. People driving around in 1958 cars and selling souvenirs made of soft drink cans are not in any position to overthrow the government. The embargo has only made average Cubans already living in poverty even poorer. They have a hard time of finding food and medicine and a decent standard of living. The embargo has negative effects on food, clean water, medicine, and other economic needs of the Cuban people. Shortages of medicine and soap have caused an increase in infections. Due to food shortages, malnutrition-related illnesses have increased. Pro-embargo argument 3 says that allowing increased trade and travel between Cuba and the U.S. would only be rewarding the Castros. They say that thousands of tourists from Canada, Europe, and other democratic nations have visited Cuba, and Cuba is no more democratic today than it was in 1959. My counter argument 3 says that the embargo has not prevented Cuban government officials from getting the goods they want. Cuban officials can get the goods they want from other countries anyway, even American goods from other countries. The average Cuban just does not have money to buy them. The embargo has not harmed government leaders and people with money. It is said that Castro is worth $900 million. The embargo has kept the Cuban people from the ideas of democracy and freedom, the very things we want for them. Fidel Castro would have been much less popular with the Cuban people if he had not had the U.S. embargo to blame for his country's awful economic situation. The embargo has been good propaganda for Fidel Castro. He calls it a blockade, which is not. It has made the Cubans more anti-American than they would have been. Some of them probably really believe that it's the United States embargo, not socialism, that has caused their poverty. Travel restrictions have deprived Cubans and Cuban Americans from having contact with their loved ones. Last week, President Obama opened up the opportunity for Cuban Americans to visit their family members. Before last week, a Cuban American could only make a trip to Cuba every 3 years. A sick family member could die before a Cuban American could get back for a visit. In conclusion, the U.S. embargo on Cuba is not morally or politically effective. The U.S. embargo is imposing undue hardship and physical suffering on the Cuban people and should be lifted. The embargo has not been effective in punishing Castro for his crimes. It has only penalized the Cuban people and prevented democracy reforms in Cuba. This embargo is unethical because it forbids the sale of food, medicine, and medical equipment, which are real needs among the poor. I think President Obama should get Congress to end the embargo and allow all Americans to be able to travel to Cuba. I hope you agree with me. Thank you for listening.